Yesterday marked 50 years since Bloody Sunday, which was a massacre that took place in Derry in the north of Ireland in 1972. It was a civil rights march. It was innocent civilians protesting, and 13 people were murdered. And the long wait for justice carries on. And I can remember probably the first time I was really aware of this event in history. It would have been around the 25th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, and I would have been about 12 years old. And that time has elapsed again. It's been another 25 years. And back then, 25 years seems like a really long time when you're only 12. And I thought, wow, this is something that happened ages ago. And now another 25 years has elapsed, and it's 50 years. And it is ages ago, but the last 25 years went like that. And it made me realize that when I was 12, looking back on Bloody Sunday, only 25 years ago, it was a recent event, but you don't have that concept of time when you're that age. And in reality, in the grand scheme of things, 50 years ago is not that long. And we're not that far removed from people in a part of the United Kingdom demanding the basic civil rights of one man, one woman, one vote, of democracy. We didn't have democracy, not true democracy, in part of the United Kingdom in the 1970s. And Derry, the city of Derry, was the epitome of this injustice, of this gerrymandering that went on, where you had a nationalist majority in the city, but the election would always ensure that you had unionists in power. Completely undemocratic. Brian cannot tell is saying shalom and blessings, everyone. Yeah, Brian, we are hoping and praying for peace everywhere. And the north of Ireland is more peaceful now than it was in the 1970s, but the heartache lingers on, doesn't it? If you're waiting for justice, imagine a member of your family murdered. It's not really, I can't imagine it. I just can't picture the pain that these people went through. Let's have a listen to some of the family members of those that lost their lives.
My name is Tony Doherty. I'm the son of Patrick Doherty.
I'm Margaret Ray, the sister of John Ray.
My name is Mickey McKinley. I'm a brother of William McKinley.
My name is Jean Haggerty. I am the oldest sister of Kevin McElhinney.
My name is John Kelly. My brother Michael Kelly was one of those murdered on Bloody Sunday.
I remember being on the march. I remember going to the march. I remember standing in Bishop's Field.
It was the beautifulest January day. The sun was shining. There was a carnival atmosphere.
As we walked along, there was a lot of singing and laughing and joking, and people were in great form. Simply because they seen how big this march was.
Barricade 12 was further on down the street. That was stopping us from getting on the Guildhall. And I remember the crowd being agitated and by what was, because we weren't getting on the Guildhall Square. There was a wee bit of riot going on further on down at the barricade.
Eventually I got round the front of the Roswell Flats and the shooting began. two bullets passed my head. I could hear the whistle of the bullet as it passed my head.
There was people saying there's 6 dead at the barricade. This is all within a matter of seconds.
Then after the shooting had stopped and people were starting to re-emerge from wherever they were hiding or cowering, somebody said to my mother that they had heard that my father had been shot in down at the Roswell Flats.
I can't remember. I think the first news said 6 people had died, and then the later news was 8, and then later again at 11 o'clock it was a greater number. So there was a few phone calls amongst the dairy ones that were there, and it was pretty much, no, we haven't heard anything. And I went to bed that night not knowing that Kevin was dead. I was woken up, I think it was about 5 o'clock in the morning when the phone rang, and it was my Aunt Eva. And somehow I knew when it was my Aunt Eva, I knew there was something wrong.
When I got into my own house, the house was packed with people. Father McLaughlin was in it, and my father approached me and he says, well, he's dead. And I just fell to my knees and on tears.
Michael was shot at the barricade by Soldier F, carried through the car park outside, then taken into this house. So that's where I was standing when my brother-in-law they were bringing Michael out at the time, and he seen me and called me. So I ran to Michael and helped to carry him and put him in the ambulance and take him to the hospital where he was declared dead on arrival.
When my mother was told that day, I never heard a scream like it in all my life, and I never will again. My mother's life was just... My mother died 2 years after Jim, and we do blame the shock of Jim's death for helping her death along. She just constantly mourned him.
I remember as a 10 or 11-year-old knowing someday that I would join the IRA, and I think a lot of people who grew up and who were children and teenagers at that period knew that that's what they were going to do. And it was a personal thing for me, but it was also a personal thing for many other people at that time. And those who didn't, and who continued to pursue peaceful methods and so on, fair play to them. But people like me joined the IRA because of the brutality of the state and because justice wasn't to be found.
We started the campaign in '92, and I thought we were successful in the fact that we made legal history to get a second inquiry into anything. And we all know how long the inquiry went on.
The campaign had 3 demands. The first one was a full declaration of innocence for our people. The second one was the repudiation of witchery, the lies, and the third one was the prosecution of the soldiers and those who planned it.
Now we've got the truth. Is that a kind of justice? I personally have reconciled myself to the fact that we will get no more.
It is heavy in innocence and light in guilt, but at the very least we have taken ourselves along the road of establishing the vast bulk of the truth about what happened that day. Might be some things still remain to be done, but we'll see.
If you look at it, there's 50 years of my brother's life was taken from him. 50 years that's been taken from us. He would have had a family, I would say. All those were lost to us. And it's certainly important that this guy and all of those who fired shots that day and tried to kill and did kill people should be prosecuted and go to jail.
You heard Soldier F mentioned there. This is one of the soldiers that murdered people that day, and he must be a man in his 70s now. We don't know who he is. He has the luxury of anonymity, and he may evade justice. And I can't believe it is 50 years. But as time goes by, it seems less and less likely that you'll ever get any kind of decision. I mean, how can you even go back? I mean, we've got video footage, we've got photos of what happened that day, but it must be very, very difficult to reconstruct any kind of details about what happened. This is Father Ed Daly, who famously tried to wave a white flag as he was helping to carry the wounded away. He administered the last rites to people that were passing away at the scene, and in total 13 were murdered, and I believe another succumbed to their wounds shortly after. And when I think about the time that's passed, you could compare it to other injustices. I know that the Hillsborough disaster, the families are still waiting for justice to be done with that. And I'm someone who spent a lot of time looking at the Middle East and the conflict in Palestine and the massacres that occurred in Palestine in 1948, which helped to expel the Palestinians from their homeland. There's even more evidence emerging about that now, and that's over 70 years gone. And it saddens me to think that as the years go by and these people and the eyewitnesses pass away from what happened in Bloody Sunday and elsewhere, you're going to lose that chance for justice. And I think someone said around the time of the Nakba, the old will die and the young will forget. And that lady there was saying, we may never get justice, but is knowing the truth enough? Is that as good as it will get? Is it enough? And what will happen now that the Nakba, going back to Palestine, is over 70 years ago? Well, I mean, in my lifetime, if I live long enough, I will be around to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the Nakba, by which point there will probably be no refugees who were born in 1948 Palestine, or very, very unlikely. They would have been very young children when they were forced to leave. Will that delegitimize the Palestinians' case if there's no one alive who was expelled from their homeland? If Soldier F passes away and we wait another, 25 years has gone in a blink of an eye, and we're now at 50 years. In another 25 years, when it's the 75th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, does that delegitimize the quest for justice, or does it strengthen it? Is it the longer you wait for justice, the more that you are entitled to it? Is that what having patience is all about? At what point do you draw a line under it and say, well, this is confined to history now? And whenever it's Remembrance Sunday, I always kick myself for not meeting a soldier from the First World War. I believe there are now none left. But in my lifetime, I would have had a chance to meet with a Tommy, do they call the Brits Tommies, or was that the Jerrys and Tommies? I could have met someone who fought in the trenches, but I never had the chance. And now, the Second World War. Well, we've had the 75th anniversary, but yeah, again, I can remember the 50th anniversary of D-Day. And that would have been a few years before the 50th anniversary, the 25th anniversary of Bloody Sunday. And then 50 years felt like a really long time ago. But now, when I see that Bloody Sunday was 50 years ago, and the Second World War is 75 years plus, it's like, wow, time is just speeding up. Time speeds up as you grow older. and you can lose track, and you can lose sight. Well, I mean, I don't know how these poor people can ever come to terms with their loss. And like the lady said, truth has to be enough. GPA, that's Give Peace a Chance, is with us. Good evening, Give Peace. You know all about these topics. And another anniversary we had. It's been 100 years since the Armenian genocide. That's another horror in our history, and I think it's sad to say it, but when you get to these milestone anniversaries, somehow it turns it from being, it turns it into like a page of history, rather than something that we can ever come to terms with. Here are the 13 victims on the screen, most of them young. And what was amazing in the video we watched is how young some of their families, and it's brothers and sisters, people who lost siblings that day, 50 years on, and they look so youthful still. And it's kind of personal to me, this one. My dad would have been on similar marches in Belfast. He was with the civil rights movement and always proudly mentioned that he was marching right behind Bernadette Devlin. And I did ask him, did they ever get violent? Because I grew up learning about Bloody Sunday, and I knew that was a civil rights march. And I thought, gosh, was my dad on marches like that? And he said, no, it never got as bad in Belfast. Derry was a real hotspot for violence, and I think that's because of, as mentioned, the completely unfair political situation that you had in that city. Brian Cantor saying, "Time may heal memories, but love never forgets." Yeah, time heals, doesn't it, Brian? But I think when you've lost someone, I always find this: you remember them as you're going along in life. When you think of someone, you think of how they are now, and if they're 30 years old now, you imagine them as a 30-year-old. But when someone's gone, you kind of think of their life and their time with you in its entirety. When you were young, when you were old, when you were in the middle, it sort of, they're taken outside of time. Don't know if that makes sense. Don't know if that makes sense to you, Brian, late on a Monday night. Remember this on news as a boy: family Irish descent and the outrage. Oh, really, Brian? Wow. Yeah, I hope you won't mind me sharing with the viewers that Brian is over in America. So you are part of the diaspora then, Brian. And yeah, it must have sent shockwaves around the world. And the black flags were being flown all across Ireland. And in the Republic, it was a national day of mourning, apparently. A rare glimpse of solidarity at state level from the Irish Republic for the nationalist people in the north of Ireland, and likewise in America, in the Irish communities over there. I'm sure it was huge and horrific news. And here's a scene where you can see the British soldier. It was the parachute regiment, and their claim was that they thought they heard shots fired, and then someone reacted. These, I imagine, if they are in their 70s now, like Soldier F, they would have been young soldiers, petrified, paranoid, probably been told that this is a crowd of IRA sympathizers plus IRA members, and it only takes one person to make that. If it's a mistake, I don't know. Is it a mistake when you shoot dead a civilian? For other soldiers to descend and go into this sort of killing frenzy? Is that a gut reaction of a soldier, or do they not have training that should make them resist that urge? But then, what do the British Army teach their soldiers? Do they teach them to go in and protect civilians and treat them as human beings, as was meant to be the mission of this deployment to the north of Ireland? Or do they go in there and see an Irish man as less than human? Kind of like the way that Winston Churchill saw the primitive tribes of Iraq, as he put it, as less than human. And he saw fit to be the first to drop chemical weapons in Iraq. Do you have to dehumanize a people if you are occupying their country? Brian Cannock is saying, some of my earliest memories, family debating the news, waiting to hear from cousins. Wow, that's close to home, Brian. Goodness, you are an Irish American who has close ties to Ireland. I know some Irish Americans have been there for generations, have been there since the time of the famine. Maybe your people went there more recently. Brian is saying, I remember it more a division between Catholics and Protestants. Well, yes, ostensibly it was, Brian, but it never should have been. And the civil rights movement was full of Catholics and Protestants together who agreed that there was an unjust statelet being formed in the 6 counties, and they wanted one man, one woman, one vote for everybody. They wanted equal pay. They wanted equal rights. And even Irish nationalism, although it is kind of portrayed as being a Catholic thing and it being Catholic versus Protestant, throughout history, there have been countless Protestant Irish nationalists, the founders of the United Irishmen, who wanted Catholic, Protestant, and Dissenter to all unite under the common name of Irishmen. That whole movement was founded by Protestants, so it was never meant to be a Catholic versus Protestant thing. But this is the divide and rule, isn't it? This is treat one group better than another, get one group to rule over another, gerrymander the constituencies so that places with majority. I don't even like using the term Catholic and Protestant, because you can be a nationalist and be any religion. You can be a unionist and be Catholic. There have been many of those throughout history also. The division is political, but it does have religious connotations. GPAC is saying, was not the church more diplomatic back then, so it might be considered more of a nationalist fight rather than religious? Well, this is what I'm saying, Give Peace. The nationalist struggle was always just that. It was meant to be about a civic nationalism to create a country where it didn't matter what religion you were. But the sectarian hatred, I'm sure, at street level was real on both sides. I'm not going to deny that. Brian Cannock is saying, true believers always united, but systems rule the day, and the religious system took control in the 20s. Yeah, that's interesting. And Ireland is still quite a religious country, but I don't think any countries are as not many European countries are as religious as they used to be. Europe has continued to kind of move away from religion, whereas in the Middle East, you've seen a revival of Islamism, or a revival of Islam in the form of Islamism and political Islam, and groups like the Muslim Brotherhood, who were kept out of politics or forbidden in many places like Syria and Iraq and Egypt for a long time. Once you get that vacuum of power, these groups that have been on the sidelines, they will rise to the top. But in Ireland, certainly in the last 20, 30 years, it's become a more secular society, as everywhere has, but they're probably still more religious, probably attend church at a higher rate than most places in the British Isles. And certainly members of the clergy would have been on these marches, and that's Father Edward Daly, who went on to be a bishop, and I think he only passed away about 4 or 5 years ago. So it shows you this memories of the 70s are still fresh in the mind. And when I think about other similar scenes, other times in Irish history, for example, 1916 is a distant memory now, and the Easter Rising. But there are video interviews with the people that took part in that uprising. So although it's distant history now, it's kind of like in touching distance. And all of our history from this point onwards, we're going to have it all on video. You're going to be watching this. Someone is watching this live stream in 10 years from now, and they're looking at the video and it's saying uploaded 10 years ago. And they're thinking, wow, is this what people watched on a Monday night back in good old 2022? Ladies and gents, I couldn't let the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday go by without mentioning it. And let's hope it's not another 25 years before justice is done. Can there ever be justice for murdering 13 innocent people? Personally, I don't believe in the death penalty, but I don't know how you come to terms with that. This has been Lessons for Life, and we'll do it all again soon. We were here, and we're gone. Latest.